It all started with Jungkook's new photo shoot with Calvin Klein, but enough to shake the marketing system in the American fashion industry. When Jungkook, a global icon already known through his collaboration with Calvin Klein, appeared in the latest campaign with a bolder concept, full of international aura and different from the usual K-pop pattern, the fashion world seemed to stop for a moment. On the screen, Jungkook is not just a K-pop idol, but a figure who seems to go beyond the category of celebrities. He appeared like a figure designed to redefine the way American brands see the global market. The campaign went down on multiple platforms at the same time. Times Square's LED screens, Vogue US's homepage, to commercial videos on digital channels. And within 24 hours, the American media began to quote one and the same question. Has Jungkook just taken over the visual language of the US fashion industry? For some, this is just an ordinary photo shoot. But for brand analysts and pop culture watchers, it was an unusual moment, the point at which visual power, global narrative, and branding strategy converged in a single figure who could no longer be considered simply a singer from Korea. Jungkook gave rise to a kind of shockwave branding, in which every major brand in the US, from Nike to Ralph Lauren, began to review their strategy in the face of this phenomenon. Because strangely, despite not being their ambassador, Jungkook managed to steal the attention they had been fighting for through tens of millions of dollars of campaigns. Fashion editor GQ America wrote, "It's not just the body, it's the control, the frame, the precision. Jungkook turns modeling into storytelling." The phrase went viral on X, Twitter, quoted thousands of times by fans and fashion industry professionals. Because behind that effortless style, there are technical details that make it different. Each of Jungkook's poses is taken with trained posture control, yet still feels spontaneous, like a combination of athlete and artist. Lighting's spotlight is made half shadow, half reality, representing the ambiguity of Jungkook's identity that the world has often seen. Global but mysterious, close but untouchable. But what surprised US observers wasn't just the visual results. They know there is some kind of formula behind this success. Any fashion campaign is usually supported by a calculated narrative. But with Jungkook, the effect feels natural even when all is clearly planned. That's what makes many big American brands feel challenged. They wondered, how could one figure from outside the US fashion system change the public's perception of the aesthetics of the American brand itself? After the release of the pictures, the CEO of one of the fashion agencies in New York was quoted by Business Insider. "We don't talk about Asian trends anymore. We're talking about Jungkook as a global trend in itself." That sentence sounds like a confession, but it's also a veiled anxiety. Because in fact, the American fashion industry has long been accustomed to being the center of gravity of world forces. But suddenly, that direction shifted. No longer coming from New York or Paris, but from Seoul, through a well-conceptualized yet personal photo shoot. There was an interesting moment when some major US brands began to shift their visual strategy just a few weeks after Jungkook's photo went viral. Among them, a renowned streetwear label that changed the approach of its winter campaign, adopting a minimalist dark lighting tone very similar to CK Jungkook's style. Fans even noticed the resemblance and accused the brand of trying to imitate Jungkook's atmosphere. But the reaction of the US public is more complex than just praise or criticism. Many took this as a sign that the American aesthetic landscape was changing, and Jungkook was the catalyst. Some analysts refer to it as the Jungkook effect, a term that is now frequently used in industry articles. The concept is simple but powerful. A single figure with cross-cultural appeal can force brands to adapt their identities to be more inclusive and global. And interestingly, this change does not come from social pressure, but from market pressure, because every time Jungkook appears, engagement and sales increase significantly. Behind the scenes, a source from Calvin Klein North America revealed that Jungkook's campaign had the highest click-through rate and conversion rate of the entire year, beating out campaigns by American models themselves. This fact led marketing executives at other brands to start holding emergency meetings, trying to understand why this formula worked. They began researching the details, from the way Jungkook looked at the camera, to the tone of the music used in his campaign videos. Even some fashion universities in the US make it a case study because the visual and social effects are too significant to ignore. But if we step back a little and look at it from a broader perspective, this phenomenon isn't really just about photos or fashion. It's about a paradigm shift of cultural power. For decades, Hollywood and the American fashion industry have been at the center of the legitimacy of what's cool in the world. But now, with the rise of figures like Jungkook, cool is no longer monopolized by the West. It comes from a cross between a disciplined Korea and an America that glorifies free expression. Jungkook manages to combine them without losing his own identity. Many say that's the secret of why he can shake up the big American brands without having to fight them directly. On the one hand, Jungkook became a symbol of global collaboration. But on the other hand, it also becomes a mirror that forces big brands to take a fresh look at themselves. When her photos appear on billboards and Instagram feeds of American celebrities, a discussion arises not just about who he is, but why such a style feels more authentic than most local fashion campaigns. In many interviews, stylists and photographers who have worked with Jungkook say the same thing. He had a strange ability to make the camera believe. Not many models can do that. Cameras usually capture imagery, but with Jungkook, the camera captures energy. That's what then makes the photo feel alive, even without the caption. In terms of pop culture, this moment also marked something bigger. The entry of K-pop no longer as a musical phenomenon, but as a visual force that changed the world's creative industries. Executives from major US labels started talking about the Korean discipline, the way Korean artists work, that combines physical exercise, visuals, and precise emotional expression. And when it's wrapped in high-fashion imagery like Calvin Klein, the result is something that even the American brand itself can't necessarily replicate. Of course, not everyone welcomed him with open arms. There are some American media wrote with a cynical tone, "Calvin Klein is selling mystique, not denim." But comments like that reveal an old fear, that America's definition of brand identity is being eroded by new figures coming from outside the system. Interestingly, in the midst of all that debate, Jungkook didn't say anything. He did not make big statements, did not explain the concept of shooting, did not refute or respond to criticism. But his silence actually adds to the visual power of the campaign itself. It was as if the fashion world was talking to each other while the main subject remained in the center of the maelstrom, calm, untouched. As one Vanity Fair editor put it, "He doesn't react, he reframes." And perhaps therein lies Jungkook's greatest appeal to big American brands. In an era where all celebrities talk too much, Jungkook chose to speak through visuals. He's not selling words, he's selling serenity. And that's exactly what makes the global audience feel connected. For big US brands accustomed to dictating trends, the Jungkook phenomenon became a soft but powerful slap. The world was no longer waiting for them to set the course. The world is now moving on its own. And sometimes, the trigger is just one photo of a Korean man standing in front of the camera, dressed in black denim and an inexplicable gaze. As soon as the Jungkook x Calvin Klein campaign exploded around the world, the atmosphere in the boardrooms of major American brands changed dramatically. No more casual conversations about winter color trends or who will be the next commercial star. There was only one topic that made everyone from Madison Avenue to Santa Monica nervous. How can one photo shoot from a Korean artist shift the attention of the American public so quickly? Behind the scenes, digital analytics reports show things they've never seen before. Within 48 hours, Jungkook's campaign became one of the most searched fashion materials on Google Trends in the United States, even beating out new product releases from Nike and Balenciaga. Engagement on Instagram is not only from K-pop fans, but also professional photographers, fashion editors, even lifestyle influencers who usually don't mention music or career at all. Big brands such as Tommy Hilfiger and Guess called a surprise meeting after seeing Calvin Klein's sales data rose almost 18% in the first week of the campaign launch. "Those are not numbers that can be considered coincidental," said one industry analyst from the business of fashion. The Jungkook effect is real. It is not just an endorser, but it has become an industry catalyst. Executives are beginning to wonder if their old strategy, which relied on local American celebrities, patriotic narratives, and authentic lifestyle ads, is still relevant. Because in fact, Jungkook presents something completely different. A combination of Korean visual precision and a global aura that feels universal. It doesn't sell Americanness, but rather something broader, an aspirational feeling without cultural boundaries. A creative director of a large denim label in Los Angeles said in an interview with Vogue Business, "The problem is not just who Jungkook is, but what he brings. The aura of professionalism, discipline, and emotional control that cannot be manipulated through advertising briefs." Since then, many major American brands have begun to review their collaboration strategies. Some began to glance at Asian artists. Some even tried to approach agencies in Seoul to gain access to K-pop stars. But the result does not always go smoothly. They forget that the Jungkook phenomenon is not only a matter of visuals, but also a matter of long-term narrative that has been built for years. Jungkook is not an impromptu model. He is a figure who has grown in the public eye with a consistent reputation. Hard-working, humble, but also mysterious. It makes any campaign that involves it feel honest, not artificial. When American brands try to replicate that approach instantly, the results feel artificial. One New York streetwear brand was even heavily criticized for copying the tone of Jungkook's photo shoot, complete with contrasting lighting styles and the same black denim. But the public immediately caught the point. "This feels like a forced version of America," commented one fashion blogger on TikTok who got more than 2 million views. Jungkook strikes a balance between sensuality and simplicity. Other brands only get their sensuality but lose their soul. The sentence went viral, and it embarrassed the brand. At that point, the American fashion industry realized they weren't competing with Korean artists, they were competing with a new cultural phenomenon. In this context, Jungkook is not just a Calvin Klein model, but a representation of a new generation that rejects old-fashioned narratives. In the past, big brands could control public opinion through made-up visuals of masculinity, big muscles, sharp camera highlights, aggressive poses, but Jungkook came up with a more subtle, more human, but still seductive body language. He does not sell the body, but sells self-confidence that does not need proof. And that is precisely what fascinated the American public. When metadata analysts researched the campaign, they found that the most positive reactions came from demographic segments that have been hard to reach for big fashion brands. Young women aged 18 to 25 and young men who are attracted to authentic confidence styles. This means that Jungkook managed to reach out to two groups that big American brands have failed to understand. The effect even spread to the entertainment industry. Some Hollywood studios are starting to pay attention, as the surge in interest in Jungkook also opens up new opportunities for visual storytelling. At this point, it's not just Calvin Klein that's making a profit. The entire ecosystem of America's creative industries is being pushed to change. But behind the praise, there is another, quieter but significant side: the old industrial panic. Many photographers and senior stylists are beginning to feel out of the formula. They were raised in a rigid and hierarchical visual culture. But with Jungkook, everything feels more fluid. It works as if not a model, but a co-creator. He has a strong artistic sense, knows when to look at the camera and when to let the moment speak for itself. One of the CK photographers admitted in an internal interview, "We didn't give much instruction. Jungkook knows for himself how to create visual tension. In the world of American fashion, which is all scripts and templates, such a thing is rare." And that's what makes big brands feel defeated not by the market, but by new ways of working. Jungkook's phenomenon made them realize that modern advertising is no longer about who's performing, but how someone creates an emotional connection that doesn't feel forced. The most interesting reactions came from American fashion technology brands such as Levi's, Gap, and Abercrombie. They began utilizing AI to analyze Jungkook's expression patterns, how long his gaze is on the camera, how his chin is positioned, up to the angle of his shoulder, to figure out why his photos feel lifelike. But even with such sophisticated data, they did not find a definite answer. Because the point is not in the technical. The point is in sincere human energy. Jungkook isn't trying to be an American icon, but to be himself, and that's precisely what makes Americans find him relevant. Now, 2 months after the campaign was released, the effects are still being felt. Major US brands are starting to change their direction, being more open to non-Western artists, more focused on individual narratives, and more careful about manipulating public image. Executives refer to it as the Post-Jungkook shift, an era in which a single photograph could shake the value of billions of dollars just because of its visual honesty. Meanwhile, in Seoul, Jungkook kept to his usual routine calm, focused without comment. But across the globe, on the glass floors of Manhattan and the boardrooms of Los Angeles, his name is a topic that is never absent from weekly marketing presentations. They no longer ask who he is, but how the world has changed because of him.